Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Duval Dive. This is Travis Holmes with BigCatCountry.com, the Believe Podcast Network, and the Duval Dive Podcast here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Observations, takeaways, etc. from the joint practices down in Miami against the Dolphins. Shout out to Jamal St. Cyr with news for Jags. John Shipley over at Jaguars on SI and the rest of the Jacksonville Jaguars beat for all of the information that they're giving out on the socials. If you can't tell, hey, I am at home. I am grabbing all of my information from those guys with the boots on the ground so that we can give you all the best observations and all the takeaways collected from all the different media-driven individuals. So let's get into it. So the first thing first. Travis Hunter, cornerback receiver rookie, and Tyson Campbell both did not practice in today's joint practices down in Miami. Liam Coen at the end of practice basically outlined that, hey, we had to make a decision on what was going to be best for the team come week one against the Carolina Panthers, because that is the true end goal. So he decided to hold both of those guys out. They both obviously practiced in yesterday's practice in Jacksonville, so they're right on schedule as far as week one is concerned. They just made the best decision that they could make for the team. He also did advise that while the Miami Dolphins starters would be playing per Coach Mike McDaniels before practice, that the Jacksonville Jaguars starters would not be playing in this week's third preseason game, just because they got a lot of their reps in both week one against Pittsburgh and week two against the New Orleans Saints. So fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at that, that means that the Jaguars starting crew will more likely than not be reasonably healthy going into week one against the Carolina Panthers for that home opener. But that also means that you'll get more snaps from the guys fighting for those other roster spots, fighting for those other position battles maybe in this week three game against the Miami Dolphins starting unit. I don't know what that means for guys like maybe, fighting for those linebacker roles, Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma and Jack Kaiser versus guys like, maybe Dewey Wingard or maybe even Eric Murray, Darnell Savage, the guys of that nature. I don't know if they're going to be playing, so that's going to be an interesting thing still to watch come Saturday night. But nevertheless, on the action on the field, hey man, Miami brought it. Miami's offense was physical. They just absolutely were. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins have been involved in two different joint practices this offseason. They had a joint practices against both the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears this offseason. Miami center Aaron Brewer stated at the end of practice that the Dolphins kind of were on the receiving end of being less physical, we'll say, in the previous joint practices, both, with the Bears basically stating that while the Lions, while the Dolphins were thudding, that the Bears were actively tackling. And then the Lions, when they had their joint practices there, those guys came out and kind of just brought it every day. And that kind of caught the Dolphins off guard. So the Dolphins came out in this one super physical, uber physical, which is saying something even when you're talking about the Dolphins offense, lowering the boom on the Jaguars defenders, and that they just seem to be not ready for what this truly was going to be. More of a dogfight than they kind of signed up for when you're supposed to be thudding, if that makes sense. And obviously that led to a little bit of scrapping going on. The guys weren't very happy with a lot of this extracurricular, we'll call it. They thought we were thudding, and then the Dolphins said nah. So it ended up resulting in multiple skirmishes throughout the practice. This was the biggest one. Shout out to one of the fans on the socials kind of put it out there. But yeah, they ended up taking it into the indoor facility after everything got cleared out. Basically, all 90 players on the field. Not necessarily fighting, but just gathering, bumping, pushing, and etc. We then got to the actual action on the field. And overall, both defenses did reasonably well, like pretty dang well. But while both offenses had maybe a few high points overall, both offenses generally struggled. Starting with the Dolphins offense. The Dolphins offense started off pretty strong in the red zone, with Tua Tagovailoa having 2 touchdown passes in the period. In the one-on-one period, he was able to kind of connect on a few longer passes, even with great coverage. Like in this situation, it was with Jarian Jones giving up the catch to the Dolphins receiver. But then Jarian ended up coming back and having a wonderful teams period for all the reports. Overall, the Jaguars defense in the teams period also had 3 sacks. I believe Eric Armstead had a sack, Devin Lloyd had a sack, and Emmanuel Agba also had a sack. Actually, I'm sorry, they had 4 sacks in the team's period, and between the first team and the second team. But on the opposite side of the ball with the Jaguars, offense, they gave up 6 sacks between the first team and the second team offense. And that's obviously not what you want to see. You don't want to see the Jaguars offense, offensive line, all the shuffling and revamping and everything else kind of struggling, giving up, blocking for the Trevor Lawrence or Nick Mullins. And they also seem to struggle opening up holes. Though Liam Coen did say at the end of practice, he wanted to specifically point out that Bashaw Tootin did have a much improved day over yesterday's, lower tempo practice, and gave him a shout out specifically. But overall, again, both defenses kind of won the day, but also the offense for the Miami Dolphins kind of seemed to be struggling in the last situational period, just getting lined up, just making those kind of throws, helping out the Jaguars defense in essence. I saw Jari, on one of the replays, Jarian Jones get a pass breakup that was a near interception. And overall, it's just a messy day for the Miami Dolphins offense. Sort of similar to the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, who also was unable to connect on multiple longer throws, multiple overthrows, namely a pretty big overthrow by Trevor Lawrence on Parker Washington Jr., who was streaking down the middle of the field in a too high safety look for the Miami Dolphins. Coach Liam Coen did mention that play specifically in his post-game availability, discussing the fact, hey, man, we just pitch and catch at that point. We got to make the throw. We got to make the catch. You get the route you want against the coverage you'd expect to be able to make it in. And it's one of those honey hole throws against not necessarily cover 2, but cover 8, very similar look. And you just kind of have to make the throw. So Trevor Lawrence was unable to kind of connect with Parker Washington on that route, but he was then able to connect with Brian Thomas Jr. on multiple longer routes. He ended up having a 45-plus yard reception, having a really dominant day overall. Like, if you want to say what's your highlight of the day, that is the highlight of the day for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Receiving core for Brian Thomas Jr., who, has up and down, scenarios throughout this training camp, to come through when it's time to play, he plays. And folks have always said it, he's a gamer. Well, he gamed today. So the Jaguars offense is not expected to have all of those guys, obviously playing on Saturday night. So this is for all intents and purposes the preseason game for the Jacksonville Jaguars starting units. But also, Liam Coen did after practice mention the fact that the Jaguars will have some trouble dressing all 4 running backs, Bashaw Tootin, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, and Hines-Allen, and that's causing a lot of angst in Jacksonville Jaguars fan bases and groupings and everything else, talking about the fact that must mean they're trading someone. No, not necessarily. That could easily just simply mean that someone is going to be in healthy scratch on game day. And that can end up being anyone from Hines-Allen to Bashaw Tootin himself, to even Tank Bigsby. You never know. I mean, Tank Bigsby has been playing a increased role on special teams, so that could result in him being on the active roster, or that could just simply be that he's just a guy who's competing for those snaps. We just don't know. It's going to come down to who's going to do the most things well for this Jacksonville Jaguars running back room, and they'll be able to make that decision soon. But I don't necessarily believe that means someone's going to be on the trade block necessarily, but those are the conversations. That's what the streets are talking about. But overall, the Jaguars didn't have the best day. Again, Trevor Lawrence ended up throwing a pick 6, actually 2 pick 6s in today's practice. One was reportedly not his fault. Like, he's throwing the ball to Brenton Strange. Brenton Strange does not identify the ball in the air, doesn't reach out to get it. It ends up going past him and going right into the hands of Mina Fitzpatrick for the Dolphins. He ends up returning it for that interception for a touchdown. And then the second interception was to Jack Jones, who also gave up the big touchdown catch to Brian Thomas Jr. later. And not the day you want if you're a Jacksonville Jaguars, if you're in the Jacksonville Jaguars fan base, obviously. But fortunately for everyone, it's just a preseason, and it's just a glorified practice. Yeah, they have an opportunity in the next 2 weeks to kind of get this thing right and show up against the Carolina Panthers week 1. So keep it locked in here at BigCatCountry.com. Keep it locked in here at the Duval Dive. Like and subscribe if you are listening on the YouTube version, and stop rate and review us on wherever you're catching your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. And we'll have you guys covered with our 52-man breakdown on, I guess Sunday after the game. But yeah, for the moment, Duval. Let's go.